Welcome everybody to the first panel discussion of Culture Cinema 2021. Let me introduce Ashish ji. First, Ashish ji is the chairman of AVGC, Animation, Visual Effects, Gaming and Cinema FICCI, and he is also founder of Punnaryug Artvision. Today, Ashish ji will moderate the panel discussion on evolving design and treatment for culturally relevant animation storytelling. Interesting topic. And we have stalwarts from the animation industry today to discuss on this topic. In the panel, we have Mr. Munjal Shroff. He is well-known animator and founder-director of Graphiti, Multimedia. We have Chetan Sharma ji. He is a renowned 2D animator and founder-director of Animagic India. Mr. Vaibhav Kumaresh, the founder of Vaibhav Studios. Mr. Ravishankar Venkateswaran is author and director of Punyakoti. It's India's first crowd-funded and crowd-sources animated feature film in Sanskrit. Let me welcome all of you to this session, and I hand over the next step for Ashish ji to take ahead this beautiful discussion with eminent people from animation in India. Ashish ji, please.
Thank you very much, Praveen. First of all, hearty congratulations to you for putting this whole event together. And I think it's been a long journey setting something like this. In present day world, when we create content and we want to make it more interesting and more deeper, and that's why 21 different verticals were selected to be a part of this culture cinema. And that interest, most of the students today and most of the filmmakers, and that's where we were able to kind of identify a set of people who actually have created in-depth liking for some of the storytelling in animation as well, which was to promote culture, color, and many other aspects of the culture or the region. And that's why we put together a panel which is going to be discussing this issue, because in animation storytelling, that the design is the most important part of the whole storytelling, because the character design to the background design to the treatment, the color treatment, the visual treatment, everything becomes a form of what you want to convey. The first thing that we want to start with is, Kish Station Bartley Boy. That's one of the most well-known, cultural content that came out of India. And we have none other than Munjal, who actually have created this with a whole deal of research for every the folk art, and then promoting the folk art. So many of you who were present in the inaugural session yesterday with a wonderful speech from Shantanu Moitra, but in the opening film from Indonesia was a true representation of what a culture cinema is all about. So Munjal, if you can quickly take us through what went into creating Krish Station Bartley Boy, and how this idea kind of captured your imagination and your team's imagination, and how exactly is this been received by various platforms. So if you can actually keep this for first 5 to 7 minutes, that would be great, so that I can go to Chetan and Vaibhav, and then to Ravishankar also.
Sure. Thanks, Ashish, and thank you, Praveenji, for having me. And this is such a wonderful event, and really hats off to you for conceiving something like this. I think much needed. And I think somewhere my journey on Krish Station Bartley Boy also started with the whole context or challenge of that our kids are growing up without an appreciation of our culture, which is so rich and diverse. And almost about 10-12 years back, on one of those many lunch conversations while sitting down in the studio with Ramonji, who was my, mentor, guru, friend, philosopher, guide. I think one of those blessings in life that I had such a wonderful teacher like him, and literally started my career under him. So, those conversations were always rich about, exposing us to, kind of what exists in India, the performing art tradition. And we started thinking that why not start looking at reviving some of these folk arts of India. I think we are really blessed land in terms of our own culture and heritage, and it's really, really vast. I mean, in my own research, we found that there are roughly about 40 cultural zones that exist in India, at least as of now, as the way we understand it. And I think our understanding is growing as we do more research in this space. But most of it is lost today. I think if you look at folk arts today, I think barring a few like Madhubani or Mughal miniature paintings or Tanjore paintings, a handful of these have survived. And most others have died. I mean, died to a point that there are no practicing artisans today. Most of the art that exists in museums is very dull, dead, very uninteresting to look at. The upkeep is not as good as it should be. So we started on this journey that let's start to revive the art forms, and at that point we started obviously doing a lot of research. And I remember spending long hours at the Prince of Wales Museum library with Ramon sir, just reading articles from Marg, and some of the other art magazines, and just researching. At that point, we, realized that yes, there is a huge treasure trove of art, right? But and interestingly, at that point, my daughter was then 8. She was starting to draw at home Banithani paintings, from the Rajasthani style. And I said, great. I think there's a Karl Khandlawala collection of miniature paintings which is on display. Let's go and take a look at it. So I think that hall had about 40 paintings, the Kumareswamy hall at the museum. And I thought probably she'll maybe spend about an hour there. And, to my surprise, she was out of that hall in 5 minutes flat and waiting at the door of the hall to get home, And I asked her, I said, look, beta, there are about 40 paintings here. Even if you spend 30 seconds on every painting, 20 minutes to banta hai. And she said that they are paintings. How much time does it take to look at a painting? And that's when it hit me that we are talking to a generation. This is the YouTube generation, For probably, people of my vintage, our search engine is Google, but the kids today, their search engine is YouTube. And that was the first thing that hit me. And I said that we need to really radically rethink this. And then, this is something that I shared with Ramon sir and Tilak, my partner, back at the studio, and said, guys, we need to really rethink our approach here. And that was when the genesis of KTV started, Krish Balti started, that why not look at taking this rich art form and then animating it, I mean, and that was one of our biggest challenges because none of this art was created or designed with animation in mind. They were meant to be just beautiful storytelling devices, I mean, at best they are comics or patachitras, right? So we embarked on this journey that, yes, let's tell these stories. And then obviously the challenge was so many different stories from so many different states of India, each with a different visual style. And we said that we need a connecting thread. And that's when we came up with the idea of 3 Sukatas, Krish, and Balti Boy, And we said that these 3 characters, these fun characters, Krish is a monkey, Trish is a Balti Boy, and Trish is a cat and Balti Boy is a donkey. We came up with these 3 really fun characters. And we said that why not let them take kids into this journey? So they would pick up a theme. So our movies initially started with a particular theme, and then whether it's the comics of India or Battle of Wits, so we would pick up a theme and we would pick 3 stories from 3 different states of India. And the idea being that before each story starts, we would talk a little bit about where the art comes from, what is the context. And again, not being preachy, but being cool. How do you make that context cool? For example, the blue color that comes, it comes from a Nilmani Phal, which is a very, very interesting seed that comes out, or the color of orange comes from the Kesuda flowers, or for example, the brushes that these artists use, they're actually made from buffalo tail hair, right? These are fun facts. These are facts that, kids want to know about. Or for example, a patachitra is treated like a real human being, So when the pat tears, they actually do Antim Samskar, so which is like a real person. So they basically do the last rites and put it in a river and bid it farewell like a real living being, right? So these tales are alive. They are a living tradition. And I thought that this is such a profound and such an evolved thought, that way we treat stories as living things, right? And I think that's the richness and sophistication of our culture, that we don't treat stories as static, as rigid, as, it's an evolving. And I think every storyteller brings something new, or has to bring something new to the telling. And this was our small effort of trying to reinterpret our culture, and trying to set a new context to it. And I think that is also where we felt that there is a need of the art. And, so basically just to set context, and that's when we started, approaching broadcasters with the idea that, hey, this is a series we want to do. And at that point of time, a lot of broadcasters says, man, this is beautiful, but very radical. We don't know whether, you're talking about a story or a series where the characters will change, your setups will change. They said, we don't get this. And at that point of time, Nafisa Ali, she was the chairperson of CFSI, and I think I met her somewhere, and that's when I told her, hey, this is a wonderful idea that we have. And that's when we partnered with CFSI for the first 2 movies. And ultimately we decided to, launch into that as a series. And it's been now on with Cartoon Network as our broadcast partner and Netflix as our partner. And on Netflix, it's gone to over 150 countries in Turkish, Polish, Chinese, and Korean. So
that's truly amazing, Munjal. In fact, I remember seeing, the step-by-step going of Chris Station Bartley Boy, and I think it's still a long way to go, because, we need to further it and take it to many other, stories be captured through these 3 characters. So we will come back to you on a couple of things, but going on to Chetan. Chetan, you have to unmute yourself first. Ever since that I know you are amongst the first 2 or 3 guys that I knew from animation world when I was still in advertising and was thinking of moving on. But your design really captured the piece of, the cultural storytelling all the time. And, I'm so fascinated every time that I see a piece of pre-production that comes from you. And even the classical animation that comes from you has fully, all the people would say, there are styles like, Japan has a style, and some of the countries have a style, and, but then we are still evolving the Indian style, and Indian style is best known with, if it's related to its heritage and few other things, and you have been one of the pioneers in creating that. So what's that inspiration that comes to you when you see a story or a brief that, you need to interpret to the visual pre-production? And because, pre-production is so critical that if you have the creative Bible only, then that's going to be followed by animators and coloring artists to take it to the logical, story on the screen. So what goes through your mind in putting that, and how you feel it's been influenced by your cultural ethos and your, upbringing when you design things?
Okay. This question actually, on some level, has to do with my entire reason for existence in animation. Okay, so I mean, now Animagic is about 24.5 years old, and from the time that we started, the whole idea was, okay, what does animation mean to us? Like, we know what the techniques are. We will, of course, the process is always on to learn, but we know what the techniques are. But what do we do with animation that that is unique to us, or that connects with our own heart? Like, where does it come from? Like, we can make tens and thousands of drawings, but those drawings should serve some purpose that is true to us. This is the basis on which we started the studio. And we really had no idea of what we were going to do as a business or anything. but the notion was this, as artists, to find what animation means to us as Indians, as artists, and then what can we tell with it. So I think primarily the responsibility first is as an artist, who are you, what do? You spend time learning techniques, you learn how to draw, sketch, color, all kinds of things. You learn color combinations, you learn what works, warm color scheme, code, all kinds of things. And you play with shapes and everything. Then all of this has to be brought to the service of the story. And this is where the most important question comes up, is what is the story that you want to tell? Like, why are you in it and why do you want to tell this story? So from say, let's say Raju and I, to Main, to Tripura, and to all of these films have to do with our background. Like, they come from us, whether they come from the lives we are living now, let's say Raju and I, contemporary India, us growing up in a city like Bombay, or to Main, which is a Panchatantra story, kind of cartoony and comical, but borrowing from folk traditions and so on and so forth. To Tripura, which is a reimagining of mythology in a particular way that we have grown up with. It's our story. And in each of these, the answer to the question that you have put forth, that how do you design things of this nature, each of these films is vastly different from the other. So they don't have to do with my skills as an artist at that particular point in time only. They have to do with what the story has to communicate to the audience. What does the story represent, both to me as an individual and to us as a society? And then whether that story is best represented in that graphic style, because every story could be done differently by all the members of our panel today itself, right? So each one of us will have our own way of responding to the same story. So yes, so our skill sets also come into the picture. Okay, where are we at this point in time? What is it that we like? What have we studied? And what did we grow up with? So that's like a whole background story. Har aadmi ke background story mein we'll have to go 20-25 years into what makes them who they are. But what makes us who we are is the fact that we have grown up within this cultural context that is India, this mishmash. Especially, I think, in a city like Bombay, you get exposed to everything under the sun, right? It's not state or driven in that sense. So in the same colony, you will have Punjabis living with South Indians living with, and South Indians are all varieties. Like, matlab, pehle to zamane mein everybody was Madrasi, right? So and within my own family, like, my mother is South Indian, but she's a Kannadiga. My father is Punjabi, and you can, all of this is a melting pot that is Bombay, and the whole film industry is a melting pot. And within that space, you really experience everything. It's like the way that an Amar Chitra Katha is able to add to pop culture by retelling our stories in a way that we can experience them. Similarly, when we are making animation films, our job is also to reinterpret those stories for our audiences, like what Munjal was saying, in terms of taking the folk arts of various traditions and bringing them to us. But when it comes to original stories with, like, characters that you are going to come up with, like, okay, what is this graphic style? Somebody will say, why don't we do it like Japanese animation, and make it all like, because it's a mythological tale, Lord Shiva, let's let's have Nandi who looks like the Hulk, and has a big ring coming out of his nose and looks just all nasty. But that's not our culture. So I think when you go back into our stories and you find the reason for why those stories are there, who are these characters, and all these stories are meant to live through all of us. You see, they are not just stories which ek kan se suna, dusre kan se nikala, bada maza aaya. They are meant to become part of our system. And when they do, you realize, oh, This is not because Nandi is supposed to be the amazing Hulk or whatever. This is not because our heroes have to land on like two legs spread like this and their hands on the ground, and the ground has to have vibrations. It is much more than that. It's not about Ram having six-pack. Ram didn't need six-pack to kill Ravan, you see, and it's not relevant. So I think the more when we get into the meat of the story, then whether it's a cartoon or whether it's a mythological character or whether it's a contemporary character, if your skill sets allow, you can be honest to the driving force, the heart of that story. And that dictates everything then. Like everything else comes from that, from the characters. Like Raju and I, the initial characters were designed by Gayatri, and they were meant to be in a space where they could be us, at the same time they could be anybody in the world, and without being like Disney-like or cartoony in that sense. They were meant to be graphic. The Maya characters were cartoony. The Tripura characters are heroic, mythological, but they are not meant to be characters who you could pick out of a Marvel comics and put there. They have to be us. So I think that's what guides that process. Everything else, I think, is techniques have been explored, color schemes, this, that, everything is related to that.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on the color scheme side because that is also a fascinating one. Going over to Vaibhav. Vaibhav, you need to unmute yourself. Vaibhav, all of us, were involved in different kind of storytelling, but the Vaibhav Kumaresh touch was always very special. It was always very different take. Although I totally agree, Chetan, talked about Mumbai. So is Vaibhav, a Mumbai guy, but telling a rural story at this point in time about the farm and everything. So how do you add that element of, humor into the culture? You are very well known to add that humor, and you add it so subtly, and also about the kind of voices you use, and I think they are unique to every single show that you do, and that adds so much of. And I always felt that okay, Vaibhav's observation skills are special, but even hearing skills are very special. So tell us something about what goes in, designing with you when you actually look at a relevance with the sounds that you use and even the characterization that you use. When you make it, cartoony, they are very unique. You look at the Neo series or you look at any of these, the present ones. Of course, I've seen some parts of the film that you're going to make, but then, that's apart the remaining content that you have made, like, the Simpu or even the one that you've made with Cartoon Network, which is a global property. If you can talk about how that really works.
Thank you, Ashish. Ashish, I think first of all, the most simplest explanation that comes to my mind is what goes in comes out, and it comes out in a modified way, or in a very personalized way. So I think like how Munjal and Chetan have already touched upon some very important those basic aspects of what influences a storyteller. I very strongly draw from my own experiences, or like whatever went in, like you said, whether it was observation or literature that we were exposed to, whether they were films or books that we read or people that we grew up with. And as Chetan mentioned, Bombay is such a mixed media in its own. My dad, my life was further complicated because my dad was in the army, so I was never in one place. So all over the country, growing up with in the army atmosphere itself was extremely enriching. It was very similar to what Chetan was explaining about the Mumbai experience. It was so while you're growing up as a storyteller, obviously you never think that you're going to be a filmmaker, you're going to make something like that, but it pushes you to doing that because that is what you soak in. That is what you find exciting, like stories, people, and people's stories. Or like Chetan mentioned, Amar Chitrakatha brought certain art forms life. Or as when I studied fine arts, we formally were introduced to a lot of Indian traditional art forms. But even when I think of the traditional art forms, they are all not the same. Each one of them is uniquely different. Someone's making leather puppets, someone draws from vegetable dyes, someone create like cupboard is a three-dimensional cupboard in which opens up to tell a story. So I feel that storyteller is the most important person, and their experiences is what they are putting into their stories with the tools they have and with the understanding of their audience. Some of our traditional storytellers, they were patronized by the kings, or there were certain stories that they loved to tell. They created certain rules, or certain structures that these stories will be told in a certain way, which eventually became traditions, or a certain way of performing that art form. So I'm sure somewhere the source must have been a very brilliant storyteller or an artist put together, or like Chetan again mentioned, different people. One could be a storyteller, one could have been an artist. They came together, they created an art form, and that became a trend, and we know it as our culture. So even today, maybe we are all doing the same process subconsciously, and I feel the most important ingredient for a storyteller is to be truthful. Like I should, if I'm really pushed or excited to tell a certain story, it is for a reason. It is cooking inside my head and it is exciting me, and I want to tell it, I want to capture it. And as an animation filmmaker, I have learned certain tools to express myself. So when that story intrigues me, I use those tools that I know, and I try to give it a physical form to share it with my audience. And even when I'm cooking up a story, I'm also thinking about my audience that, wow, I hope they love it. They enjoy the story that I'm or this experience that I'm putting together for them. So I feel we all, all our panelists or even the participants, they all would have their own stories in their head that excites them. So as long as they tell it truthfully, it's very important for the storyteller to also analyze, why am I telling the story? What is so exciting for me? Why should I share it? Like if I remember the very first time I traveled abroad and I saw a beautiful place called Annecy. I'm sure most of us know. And when I saw certain places over there, it was so beautiful that I thought, "Arey, mobile phone nahi tha, camera tha. सोचा इतने photo लूँगा, I want to share this with my family, with my everyone, my friends, my girlfriends. यार कितना बढ़िया था." So that urge to share some happiness that you have, I think it's the same urge even when you're making films. We want to share. We are very excited to share our point of view with our audiences and hope that they will also enjoy that experience. So at the crux of it, it is that Ajit. For me, I've just been trying to do that. When I get excited with something, I try to put it on paper. I try to make a film out of it. And thank God, there are many co-conspirators, our team members who also are equally excited. They also contribute to it, and a product comes out.
So, you're a very special thing that all of us always, looked at you for your sound design in every show that you do.
Right.
And even the way you actually do the dialogues.
Yes.
And that's something which is very much a unique skill for any director to do that. How did it come about?
I think that is also something which probably excited me. Like when people are talking over here, there are different sound textures. Like say I'm probably moving around too much. Maybe many of them are not moving around. So there are so many things as storytellers, we are observing, and that is what we capture, especially when we try to capture people. They are made up of so many components. So I think somewhere maybe I used to observe that, or I used to, that got stuck in my head, and that's why that went in and got stuck. So that's why that came out in and in some of uh, like I said, in some of our work, I try to draw from my own experiences. So people I know or people I've heard also, feature in my stories. So I'm sure people can connect with them better, because we've also met such people, and it's more truthful that way.
Correct. I think you mentioned at least 3 to 4 times that once you are trying to tell a story, you have to be true to the story and you have to true to the subject. And I remember, while creating Little Krishna and Krishna or Kans, they were all stories which were 5,000 years ago, and then you have to be truthful to that period. And when uh, you are thrown with a imagination challenge of how do you create 5,000 years ago, a place like Mathura or Vrindavan, and that how can you be truthful to the descriptions, then certain personalities come to your mind. So of course, when we were designing Krishna, Chetan came to our mind, his hairs came to our mind, and a lot of things did get inspired from there. But uh, when there was no electricity, and the vegetation was very rich, and the potency of vegetation was very high at that point in time. At the same time, you and interpretations of those descriptions is something that you need to learn from, and then try to recreate it in the form. And then the Swamiji said that I don't want anybody any human being to act like Krishna, because they cannot do justice to that. And that's where animation became easy, sell for us. So if that cannot be there, but then came a challenge that cartoon versus realistic. So whenever there was an animation story in the cultural form, they said, oh, it's always a cartoony. That's the one which comes to their mind. And then when you want to create realistic, I said that too much of realism will not look good. You need to have a stylized storytelling. And if you have a stylized storytelling, then everything starts falling in place. So you create something which is a in between kind of a path, and that's a cultural representation that you try to bring in, because we had flowing clothes at that time. People wear a dhoti and the rest of the things. Then you had a lot of jewelry that is moving around, and then you have most of the activities in the open air, and then you have the hair that were moving around, because there are too many kinds of animation. So all put together, it's a very difficult proposition even to put the colors together, because the colors were very rich and they were not as polluted as we live in today's world. So all that would add to your form of storytelling. And once a story that we saw, recently, uh, in the first time I saw that was in the Abai Fest, and then I saw it for several times, and now it's kind of making major rounds around the world, is Ravishankar's story on Punyakoti. So Ravi, if you can unmute yourself and tell us, uh, you know, uh, first of all, the cultural story has a lot of language relevance, and you chose to tell the first ever animated story in Sanskrit. And I think that was a very unique thought. But how did you think about it? And when it came to design, you had a very different design. Your design reminds me of what Saumitra and Shilpa created in Gopika and Bhagavan. Very unique story, very
Gopigan.
unique style. but their colors and their treatment was very different than what you have created. So if you can take us through that quick journey that you had in creating Punyakoti, and what Punyakoti means to you, and why Sanskrit?
All right. Hey, thanks, Ashish. And like, I am so privileged to sit with Vaibhav, Chetan, Munjal, everybody, because I am outside the industry. Like, I work for a bank and animation is my hobby. It's not my profession.
Yeah, man, we always, ever since the film has come and we have known you, we always considered you part of our industry. You don't go out. We are not going to leave you.
I mean, it will be my honor, like that I am considered as part of the animation industry was my lifelong dream. So
sometimes I think we also wish we were working in a bank.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so at least the inspiration for Punyakoti and Sanskrit, like Chetan mentioned, or like Vaibhav mentioned, I was a storyteller all the while. I started my career as a copywriter in an advertising agency. And I was a trainee there, and I used to write script for Multimedia. And the first Multimedia CD-ROM for kids in India, which was the Panchatantra, was designed by me. And it was all happy accident, because the person who was supposed to design the CD-ROM, interactive CD-ROM, got an admission in a US university, and she had to leave. And she said, I have a trainee boy who doesn't know anything, but like he has poked his nose in every aspect, because like he is like the go-to person for everything. So if animators come, he's the guy who trains them. He's the only one who knows from head to toe, because he's been tagging me all along for the last 3 months. So in the 3rd month of my traineeship, I was made the project lead for that project, and I completed the project and delivered it. And subsequently, of course, I did my MBA in HR and became a process designer and everything. And I left animation completely. But like something that a Australian delegation had come to India, and they said, oh, Indians can never make good animation. And that stuck to me. And I said, like, look, if I get a chance in my life, I want to change that impression. And my lifelong dream was to make one movie in my life. And I would say, if I make a movie, I will die the next day, because that's all that I want to make. Like one movie, full-length movie I will do. And I don't know which language, what subject, nothing. And I heard the story of Punyakoti, and I had tears in my eyes that this mother would kind of go back, give up her life for the sake of her daughter. And something that stuck to me, and there were several influences that went into it. Like, so I attended a Sanskrit workshop, conversational workshop in Infosys, where I was working. And the teacher said there are no contemporary works in Sanskrit. And I said, if any other country, like my first wow moment when I heard about Sanskrit was that it was a language that was made of sounds instead of words. And like, we always look at language and mathematics as separate, but here was a language where you can take a sound, apply an algorithm, and it will become a word. So it's like mathematics and language combined together. And I said, if any other country had this, okay. When I went to Europe, when I went to Hirsch, they have a museum for Tintin. So someone can make 20 comics and they can become a legend in that country. And I looked at the kind of work that were done in Sanskrit. If you read it from left to right, it is Mahabharata. If you read it from right to left, it's Ramayana. I said, if people can create this amazing work, and I got exposed to Kalidasa. I always thought that I knew literature. I knew that this were several notches above. And I was thinking that we had all this, but like it took me 40 years in my life to even discover that we had a language like this, or to get familiar with a language. So I wanted to leave something for the kids. And that was the first instinct. And I thought that if I make an animated movie in Sanskrit, I will be no competition to anybody. People will say he's crazy and they will leave me alone. So I will have full freedom to do what I wanted to do. No compulsions, no producer, nobody. Of course, luckily I went and met Mohandas Pai. He suggested that you crowdfund it. So that saved me the trouble of having any producer on top of me. So I had a producer, I had the freedom. I could tell my own story in a language that nobody understood. So it was like everything that and the luckiest thing is, this was my debut movie. I had no exposure to animation. So I was like I had surrendered to all the talent that was available around me. And few things I was very clear about. I knew that traditional cinema had advanced a lot in terms of sound, in terms of music, in terms of dialogue rendering. So for me, animation movie was not just the animation movie. I mean, the person who did the sound was a national award winning sound. He had worked with Rasul Pukuti. Yeah. The person who did the editing of the movie was a national award winner. The person, of course, who did the music was Ilayaraja, who had done 1,000 movies by the time I went to him. So I wanted somebody who could understand these different aspects of bringing, and because I wanted it to touch all the senses. Because I said, if Sanskrit should not be learned from a textbook, Sanskrit should be learned from a cinema, because it touches all your senses, your emotion. It remains in your memory. And that's how we recall languages. So I wanted that to happen. And that led me to look at styles and design and things. And I found this person in Bangalore who had left her job as an engineer to save puppet art in Karnataka. And I looked at the design, and she knew Sanskrit. And she told me that how Bharata Muni had put the specification for stage art. So that became a design inspiration for me. So he talked about the two-layered art. Like if you had seen my movie, the first up to the interval, it is the same locations up to the interval that come after the interval, but they come in two shades. The one before the drought, the one after the drought.
I was going to ask you about the way you have, used the color treatment.
Yes. So it is the same locations. See, one, I didn't have much budget. So I had to reuse some of the things that I had with me. But at the same time, I had to show. And the second thing I realized when I got exposed to all of this was the way we tell stories is very different. We don't have black and whites. We don't have villains and heroes. There are good things in bad people and bad things in good people. So my character design took that shade. And the person who designed the characters was also exposed to traditional folk storytelling in Kerala. So I asked him for how colors get mapped. So you would have actually seen violet colored people and all in my movie, because those are all coming from the Kathakali traditional forms where each color had a connotation. So I could take hold because I surrendered to these people and they said, sir, we don't know English, but we have great depth of design. We were trained by people in Disney and other people. Okay. But we know how to tell a story, how to design a character. So I said, like, you don't worry. Okay. You tell me, I will speak the English in front of the people in front of the camera. Okay. You give me your art. Okay. So they all wanted a forum for self-expression. And the story were designed like it is not linear. It doesn't end. We have circular stories, right? Like, because we believe in rebirth, we believe in karma and all those things. So my story begins at the end. There is a new, it doesn't end. It's cyclical. We say we never learn so one story is over, but we never learn our lessons. We are going to do the same mistakes again. We will again go and spoil nature. So my story is cyclical. So these were all design inspirations that I received from various people. Like, and I didn't know the word rigging when I started this. Yeah. But I knew how puppets were designed and moved. So I went and said, they said, no, this is all figured out in animation. We call this rigging. So it was a great, so I could write scripts, I could draw. So I used to draw, and I have made 2,000 drawings in my imagination. And like I used to draw all this and I used to share with them. And this is how I want it. And we got 22 different people to do storyboards. And we had a core team that took the best of the shots from all of them and collected together. Because always I thought I'm going to only make one movie in my life.
That's a very expensive way of making animation, boss.
Yeah, I know.
Having 22 storyboard artists and selecting the best out of the 22, it's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah, that's crowdsourced. So luckily for me, I did not have any overhead. All the money that I had to be given only to the animators, right? So 70 to 80% of my production cost was given to the artists. So these were like some of the things. So I had, so that, and of course I didn't have a studio. My bedroom was my studio. So all the movie got made only on Google Hangouts. I could not afford, all of them were freelancers. So that was So necessity was the mother of all the creativity that you see.
And what about the culture of crowdsourcing in cinema, in animation film?
Yeah. So, I mean, because I had to go to different artists, I had to go to different people, I had to convince them. And I had to, I mean, if I go to 100 people and tell them, and I tell them, this is how I want the movie, 2 people will understand what I am trying to say. So I had to crowdsource these people. I could not hire any of them, but like I got people who were inspired. For example, the environment was done by an artist in Romania. And one of the scenes, the market where this one was done by a guy in Brazil. So I was able to inspire the crowd through Facebook and other things and get these people to come together. And I was just like the Sutradhar who was bringing all these things together. And so that was
amazing story, Ravi. In fact, you have laid in practical, without writing the code, you have created a blockchain of production.
Yeah.
Of animation. And I think blockchain is going to follow what you're trying to say, would be done someday on the blockchain itself.
Yeah.
But truly amazing, very inspiring. And I tell you, industry need people like you. You should be making more films. And
if you call me for 4 more panels, I will leave my job and come. I'm already like on the this is what I want. Now I want to do this full time.
Yes, you must. And so the very first screening you had, I attended that, and we met soon after that screening.
That's right. I still remember.
And I remember, that every single frame that you have in the film is truly enchanting. It's an amazing piece of world, and I appeal to people to see this movie. It's there on
Netflix.
On the Netflix already, so you will be able to see it. So I'm going to come back to you in a quick quick question that I have, because we are running out of time. Munjal, in fact, I want you to unmute yourself. And the thing is that what's very strongly evident in Krish and Bartley Boy is the use of cultural, folk songs and the music, and that's adding a whole lot of different flavor to that whole piece of cultural interpretation in the animation movie. And I believe you must have got a great feedback from the kids, because I think the way the music engage kids and all of us, it's very different than just a plain story. So what went into using all the folk songs and everything that you've actually brought into the creation of Krish and Bartley?
So, when we were creating Krish and Bartley Boy, one of the things that I wanted to really give kids a flavor of India, right? And I'm saying, when you look at the flavor of India, it's not just stories, it's not just art, it's also spoken word, it's also music. I personally listen to very, very diverse music, from not just across India, but across the world. And it's always been fascinating that, like within India, we have such varied sounds, such varied instruments, and I felt that somewhere we need to expose our children to that, and also, I think the other thing that always fascinated me is like the way Hindi is spoken across India is so different, right? Yet we all get it. I mean, a guy from Kashmir, if he lands up in Kanyakumari, he will probably hear a very different accent or a different twang, but he will still get it. And that's his version of Hindi versus to someone who's in Gujarat, and his version of Hindi is again, will sound very different, And I thought that was very amazing. Very few countries in the world possibly offer this kind of a rich diversity. So I wanted to expose kids to that whole auditory experience as well. That hey, this is it, and that's why when we designed Krish Bartley Boy, we said that let's pick 3 different states, and so that the way Hindi is spoken across that movie, is very different in all 3, because Rajasthani Hindi is very different.
I really like the Madhubani part of it.
Right. I mean, that is playing to the gallery, right? I mean, that language is so fun, right? And I think the other good thing that we got is from an dialogue perspective, we got some really brilliant voice artists, right?
Yeah.
So we had guys like Baba Saigal, who is basically the voice of the donkey,
Yeah.
and I mean, he just brought so much fun to it, and Smita, who's done, the cat, Trish, so Daman, who originally did, the monkey, so they all brought, and then we had a whole bunch of people from NSD, National School of Drama, who came and gave voices, and they just went to town. They took it to another level, and what we used to do is interestingly, I used to, at least whenever we are attempting a different movie, like for example, in between Odia, right? Now, I didn't really have a working knowledge of how, Odia people speak Hindi. So I used to actually pull in someone who came from Odia, and I said, boss, supervise this. I want you to, jo lehja kehte hain na, I mean, that the texture, right? So, which probably, I wanted it to be authentic in that sense that, or the way the Hyderabadi Hindi, the Hindi is spoken, right?
Yeah.
It has its own personality. I mean, the first one sentence, this is Hyderabadi Hindi or this is Rajasthani Hindi, right? The other part obviously is the music, and we had an amazing friend, Shalini Sharma, who did the music for this. And I think the first time when I called him in and I told him what we were doing, he says, boss, I'm going to do a whole ton of research. He says, this is going to be one of those projects where I'm really going to look back and say, man, kuch acha kiya maine life mein, right? And I could see the passion in his eyes. And and again, I think we didn't have massive budgets, right? I mean, because when we were doing the movies, we always were struggling, because we put in a lot of our own money into this, so, and serious money, because it cost to produce this kind of art, the music, research, all of that. But he just came on board and he just took it to another level, So I think, again, a lot of times, if you create something and which excites people and involves them passionately, like Ravi has been talking about, I think they bring so much. I think our job as filmmakers is that if you have a project where you can get people excited and passionate, I think you've done your job, right? Then you have to give them the canvas and let them paint.
Sure. So Chetan, yeah, you have to unmute. Chetan, you have been actually a true student of animation. You've studied several forms of animation, including Miyazaki and a whole lot of things. What do you think, who has been, or which are the kind of projects which you feel are a true representation of, a cultural, cinema or cultural stories through animation that have been told so far?
You mean in India?
No, anywhere from anywhere.
Well, when we are looking at an end product, we are already experiencing the culture of a country. So where it has come from, what all has fed it, all that becomes a subject for research, basically. You find that in the stories of like people like Miyazaki that you mentioned, artistic and stylistic influences can be French artists and whatnot, even in his work. But the stories that he is telling are quite uniquely Japanese in many ways. So and the great thing is that that because they are Japanese at the heart and soul of them, is why they appeal to the wide world. They don't appeal to the world because somebody decides कि हम लोग एक generic world market के लिए I'll make a film. They make a film because it makes sense. It's a story that he wants to tell. And this is true of all filmmakers who have made great films which they have really believed in. You find that belief is there behind all those projects, which stand the test of time, which are loved all over the world, which are respected, and the art of it is one aspect of it. The reason for being is the other aspect of it. And the reason for being is usually what communicates to our audiences around the world. Like today we can watch films in any language, right? Today kids are watching Korean, soaps and whatnot. So it's not like unka sabun hamare sabun se better hai. It's just that the story connects. So
no,
we don't mind a soap.
I didn't ask kiska sabun better. I asked what are the best
I'm just
examples.
saying that
I asked you which are the best example according to you, because you look at art very critically. So
Yes. No, what I'm saying is that the reason why people are watching a lot of Korean soaps is not because those soaps are better than, soaps or whatever. And it's that the storytelling or whatever that is appealing to their sensibilities, right? Now, also stylistically, because there's an aspirational aspect to it. So when you see ads also, you will see that they want to appeal to, let's say, a middle market in India, but they'll always, park it so that it's like slightly upper middle class looking thing, but they're actually marketing it to people who can't really afford that kind of a house. So aspirational aspect we have on what, but anyway, that's a side story. In terms of the art aspects, a lot of places have evolved their animation style based on their comic books.
yeah,
Right. So especially in Japan and in France, you find this to be a very major thing. Not so much in Britain. And
even in US.
yeah, and in Britain you find that their humor or their sensibility drives the storytelling or whatever media they make actually. So whether it's rock music, whether it's Aardman's animation, whether it's Monty Python, it's all like weird stuff. Okay, but but the French have a very different twisted way, which they have experienced in their own comics. They've actually put it out, and so they have been able to play with, and there's a continuity of form, so their animation films don't look the same as the next. Whereas in the Hollywood context, there is a market driven requirement for making films. So while originally Disney's influence was old world Europe and everything, the overall thing is decided by like the largest possible market that we have to look at. And these are the main markets. Like if you look at people in South America, what they're doing is largely a style which is taken from the American way of doing things. And the rest of like the east of Asia is basically following whatever Japan is doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think we are placed somewhere in between. And in a very interesting way, because we also have our own film industry, so we have a sense of pride कि हम हैं ऐसा हमारा भी एक मकाम है दुनिया में.
Yeah, we are stuck between film of India and the IT of India.
So in that sense, we are able to absorb like the technical aspects and the design aspects of all over the world. Okay, so like if I'm studying Miyazaki, like all of us have, I'm sure, studied Miyazaki at some point in time and watched films and enjoyed them. Even if you enjoy a film, it's as good as because you imbibed it, like what Vaibhav said, what goes in, comes out in some way. So there is a heart component in those films, which is really like, sometimes you can't make out different characters in different films. All the girls look the same and all. But the thing is that the film always works to your heart. Now, in India, we have an embarrassment of how much visual material there is and how much auditory material there is. This is what you've been touching upon in this entire panel, and we are just a few representatives who are scraping some parts of it from whatever our inroads into it. But each artist really has to and of course it's a collaborative art, so let's remember that also. So every project is going to be always a melting pot of influences, like Ravishankar was saying, like Munjal was saying, and we have all experienced this. When you are making Krishna, there were like hundreds of people working on Krishna, come from all different backgrounds.
Yeah.
But what drives them always is what the heart of the subject is. I think the style can change and the style can evolve. It can be a personal style. It can be a style based on a traditional system. It can be something where you adapt. It can even be a Western based style. But what kind of story? Even if it's animation itself in a way is a Western medium. I mean, our puppetry and all that is fine. So we just move our puppets. That's not animation. Animation is giving life to it,
Yeah.
right? So that technique is, in a sense, let's say a technological invention from the West. But what we do with it, just as we do with our films, they don't have an equivalent of Shah Rukh Khan. There is a unique component. It's not there in Japan. It's not there in the US. It's a crazy thing that we have here, and even in our music, the way all of these things are melded together. Like Shantanu, I was opening the program yesterday. He's done music for you. He's done music for me also, and it's a melting pot of influences. It's not one thing. Traditional folk music se leke, Tagore se leke, sab kuch se leke is all coming out from one person. He's just one music director. There are umpteen like that.
Yes.
So all of us artists are really studying and absorbing our environment and all the culture that we can take. So whether it's dance, whether it's classical arts, whatever it is. And in the subjects that excite us, or in the subjects that come our way to get made into films, then we can probably bring it through ourselves and be true to it, like what Vaibhav was saying. कि उसका ट्रूथ मिलेगा कैसे, वो सुपरफिशियली चिपका के नहीं होगा, you know, कि अच्छा ये स्टोरी है, मैं क्यों ना इसके ऊपर ये चिपका दूं और ये चिपका दूं और ये बन गया. For it to be truthful, it has to come from within. So it has to be absorbed and become part of the bloodstream. That I think is, as artists, as individuals, our real biggest challenge. बाकी सब जो है वो process hai. It's like trust the process and trust Bhagwan. So, so like Sai Baba said, Shraddha and Saburi, you know, animation के keywords जो हैं वो उन्होंने बता चुके हैं already. Patience and faith. Remaining, you have to sacrifice yourself.
Thanks, Chetan, for a wonderful interpretation. But actually, we have Anju in our session right now, and Anju wants to ask one question. Anju, please go ahead and ask the question.
Hi.
Hi, Anju.
Hi, I'm sorry. My name here says Untaboo. That's my company name.
I know.
It's been wonderful listening to all of you here. I am not from the animation world, but I am trying to use animation to break some cultural taboos that we have in our country. And I see all of you, of course, have been promoting our culture through stories, dance, music, and that's wonderful. And I wanted, as all of you are mavericks in this industry, I would love to have your opinion of what you feel about breaking cultural taboos using animation. So I am, Untaboo is a company which is into safety and sex education for children. And that is such a huge taboo, but such a need of the hour. And I have found that animation is really helping me reach out to those people, you know, that initial hesitation that they have. Animation and humor has really helped me break that and make it less embarrassing and more acceptable for people.
Yeah, Anju, in fact, that's so much true. In fact, some of those examples are already created by Vaibhav. Vaibhav did a whole series in animation, very beautifully created for the West Bengal government on education for AIDS. Vaibhav, can you come unmute yourself? And...
Yes.
Oh, I would love to see that, Vaibhav.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a series. It's a character called Buladi. You know, she was a glove puppet, and like artists would, you know, they would perform street plays to raise awareness about AIDS. This was more than a decade ago. And then O&M Kolkata, you know, they decided that let's convert, because Buladi was very popular as a character in those stories or the plays that they would perform. So they felt that we should make films out of it so that the reach is much wider.
Right.
And that's how, you know, those were glove puppets. So we animated that glove puppet with an armature inside with stop motion, like made out of foam and sari cloth and everything. So yes, those, what I felt was when you use the medium of animation, automatically it's a very neutral medium because you're not seeing real people, but you believe that those drawings or those puppets are people, you know, because they are alive and they are behaving like you and me. So there is some, you know, I would want to trust that character as an audience. So I think that's a very big plus that animation has. And being an art form, the storyteller can use such beautiful film language to convey the story even more effectively or the message. So I think what your intention of using it to address, you know, these taboo subjects is very good, because one, you would have a certain format in which you want to give the content or spread the awareness, and I feel animation medium is a very good carrier for that kind of a message.
Anju, in fact, we have met in the past, but I must say animation also offers a very unique, you know, ingredient that no sooner you dub it in any language, nobody can say that it's not created in that language. So for you to create a content, because the kind of a topic that you're working for, has to be conveyed in as many languages as possible. And it can be very helpful. We as an industry can definitely come and help you. So we will definitely reach out to you and figure out how to help in this talk.
And I just add,
Absolutely, and I would love to share my films and show it to you all and tell me what you feel. Though it's a very expensive medium, and
so Anju, let me share some very interesting insights. So as Graphiti as a studio, we've been working very closely with UNICEF for over 20-25 years now. And the process was started by our late chairman and founder, Mr. Ram Mohan, and he created a character called Meena for UNICEF. And it was the girl child campaign, and through that character, a host of different issues have been addressed, right from, preventing child marriages to good hygiene, good menstrual hygiene, diverse topics, and interestingly, UNICEF's own experience and research has proven that most people find that by the sheer fact that you're watching animation, which is an imaginary medium and there are no real people, so people suddenly then stop worrying about who the actor is and start focusing on the issues. And this has worked beautifully on the grassroots levels, and again, I'll cite one more example, again on AIDS. So we did a campaign for NACO called Jawan Hu Nadan Nahi, and where we created two characters, Amar and Jyoti, and basically through these characters we were talking about how you should not get forced into having sex because of peer pressure. Now these are very difficult subjects to talk about, and as a part of that, obviously been working in NACO, we spoke to a lot of people who were affected with HIV and AIDS, and initially they started showing testimonies of people who had did the wrong thing, or were not using safe sex, and then they land up, and then there was an immediate disconnect that when they started showing to teenagers in schools or colleges or in villages, they felt, ye to uske saath hua hai, mere saath nahi ho sakta. Because that it is that person, because they are identifying that person as the real person.
Right.
But moment you're using animation, that person is imaginary, right? So you are not struggling with that, and suddenly you accept that character and then start focusing on what he or she is saying. So, I think that, at least our experience, and I think our people on this panel will all tell you that our experience in social communication vis-a-vis animation is concerned is remarkable. I think all of us have done campaigns which have been very, very effective in bringing about social change. Like I'm working on a campaign right now for TriFed, which is a tribal body. We designed and conceived a campaign to essentially train and communicate to tribal villages, tribal gatherers, forest product gatherers, and we are trying to literally change the entire ecosystem, of saying that, look, there are people to help you. And it's been fascinating. We've just finished about 4 or 5 films and they've gone into the field and the response is remarkable. Right. So I think you're on the right track, and by all means, reach out to us.
Thank you. That's very heartening to know, because though I have been in the field of sex education for 10 years, this is our first inroad into using animation for education. So would absolutely love to tie up with any of you all who would be interested to see our work and see if there's any possibility of helping or collaboration.
Definitely.
I would actually suggest, reach out to NACO and see, they or I can also send you a comic. I think comics are also a great medium. What we did in NACO, we actually produced comics first.
Okay.
And the campaign is called Jawan Hu Nadan Nahi. Maybe it might be. And we also, the other thing is we designed board games.
Yes.
So, and then we found that to be very effective.
Right.
So
Vaibhav wanted to say something.
No, I think Munjal mentioned that precisely, comics. I was about to say that it's much cheaper, cost-wise, and it's equally effective, if not more, because digitally, comics are also being consumed very, very, like on the digital medium.
Right.
Reaching it also is simpler, and producing it is quicker, cheaper.
Fast.
Oh.
Absolutely.
What we are doing is slightly different. Though comics, I'm sure, can be a great source. We've created an entire curriculum. So these are curriculum for the school, grade 4 to grade 12.
Okay.
So in that, you need kind of, something that they see, which is a video, and of course, text that they learn and make it more gamified for assessment and that kind of thing is the route that we are kind of going.
There are hybrid mediums like
Yes.
motion comics.
Right. I was just going to say that.
Okay.
If you add, with limited panels or limited images, you add music and audio to it, and it almost
Right.
becomes like a film.
Absolutely.
So, Anju,
So-
what might also help you is to look at the work that UNICEF has done, especially on the MENA project. I think there's some, you might be able to draw some very good inspiration there.
Right.
Or you can reach out to me. I'm happy to share. I mean, MENA started out, interestingly, as an animation film. Today, it's a radio program as well.
Yeah.
So again, I think some really interesting work has happened on the MENA project. And again, since you're talking about, so there are guides, right? So what happened is that from the animation films, we devised guides for teachers to how to use that material in schools,
Right.
They then use them to create plays, right? So the same stories were acted out as plays, in schools and street plays. And then these kids took these street plays to their villages, right? And some of them were whether having a closed bathroom for women, whether it was, preventing child marriages, treating girls equally as boys, all of these kind of things,
Right.
So it became a movement. And I'm sure at a certain level, that's what you're also trying to do.
Absolutely.
Create a movement.
Yeah.
So I think some really interesting examples. And again, like I said, that there's a good 20-25 year experience that is there. So I think it might benefit you.
So
Thank you. Really
Anju, we will connect with you, and I'll send you
Yes.
the numbers of each one of them. And
Thank
then
you.
we
Really
can
appreciate
take
that.
it. Yeah, we can take it forward. But I've been getting a lot of calls from the organizers because we've overshot, I think, almost by 14 minutes. But a big thank you to all of you, Ravishankar, Vaibhav, Chetan, and Munjal. And of course, big thank you to Anju for sharing what you're doing. It was amazing talking to you guys. In fact, we are missing meeting in person. But every time that we are on panel, it's a really lovely feeling to interact with all of you. And it was quite a thought-provoking session. And I think these are a few of the sessions that I would like to save as personal collections. And I think these are really great sessions where the communication is heart to heart. A big thank you to Praveen and team for setting this up. And I think the Culture Cinema series year on year can go. This is the first year, but we think it's a great initiative. And, from our industry, there will be always a big support for you. And I think we should have a special section of culture animation cinemas and films, which can form a good section. So over to you, Praveen, with a big thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for having all of you with us. Amazing panel and amazing audience too. For Mr. Ravishankar, we have another film festival called Kids Cinema, and there is a special section on animation, and I'm sure you're going to be there on the panels. Plus,
you're making sure he leaves his job and come here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, we had some senior bankers also in the beginning for a long time. So I'm once again, let me thank all of you for coming and sparing your valuable time on a Sunday, being here with us. Thank you so much. We'll meet again. With this, I'll say goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.